SE02. Right, so because we're morons and we're trying a new setup today, we didn't conduct a thorough enough test before recording this episode for the first time for you guys. So we had some slight sound issues, and by sound issues, we didn't have any sound coming from Gem. So we're using some new software today. So as you can see, as you can't quite see, but Gem and I are in the same room for once, which is the first time that we're doing this in a video format. In our earlier sound-only episodes, we were in the same room for a few of them. So new setup today, 2 cameras, we've got some new software that we're running, and we can now hop camera angles, so that's quite cool. It's the first time that we're doing anything like this, so yeah, we got it a little bit wrong the first time.
Just a bit.
So yeah, bit of an own goal there, and we live and we learn. So, but in a way, it's kind of good because we now know exactly what we want and need to talk
Exactly, you
about.
learn from your mistakes. You just make sure you don't make them again.
Yeah. So, it's kind of like we've rehearsed this one, so we know the topics that we're going to cover. So, Jem, take it away with Moto3, I guess.
Yeah. Obviously, just wanted to confirm. So it's TFT podcast, labelling this season 2, episode 1. A little bit late in the day. I know we've had a few races, had a few Superbike races, but we'll get to that. So Moto3. Now, I have to be honest, I didn't really watch the race as intended. I did have to have a very important online meeting that is to do with, an all-round thing in terms of our podcast, but it's kind of slightly different. But we'll get into that more. It's a bit of a top secret thing at the moment. So I saw Deniz drop it whilst leading. So it is what it is. You race in the wet, you push hard, you're going to come unstuck. Khan did watch the race in full, so you can tell us a bit more about it, mate.
I did. It was disappointing because he looked quids in for a win today. Like he was, obviously it would have been his first win, as we know, and like we were discussing in take 1, I don't know how much of it for him was nerves. I don't know if there was an element of like, I'm going to win today and it's going to be a big win and I'm just going to march off into the lead. So for those of you that maybe haven't seen the race yet or don't know the result, Dennis dropped it, I think, on somewhere around lap 5.
You said about lap 5 or 6, yeah.
Maybe even 7, I can't remember exactly, but very early on. And it was down to
impatience.
I don't know. He looked from the moment that the lights went green, he was on the ragged edge today. He was just riding like a man possessed. He was missing apexes left, right, and centre. He was pushing and pushing hard, and it was being picked up on by the commentary team as well. That was like, what are they putting in his water today? Like he's on one, and he was having he had a couple of sort of moments, and in the first 2-3 laps there was a little bit of back and forth for the lead, and it was like, oh god, there was a few hairy moves that went in from not just from him but from the other riders as well. There was a couple of hairy moves, and he was either today it looked like from the minute go he was either going to win it or he was going to bin it.
Yeah.
And
unfortunately, it was the latter.
Unfortunately, it was the latter, and unfortunately he ended up binning it. So disappointing. I think, like I said, maybe he just needs to get that first win. He needs to get that first win under his belt and just get rid of the nerves, and for it to not just be a monkey on his back. Today, unfortunately, wasn't his day, but it doesn't change how disappointing it was. But outside of that, it was still quite an interesting race. But unfortunately, a race without Dennis. So.
Yep, and obviously I saw Ayumu Sasaki drop it as well. So probably I'd say the championship favourite, going by last season's form, how he really picked up for me, Sasaki is probably the favourite because you've had some big hitters from that class get promoted. So outgoing champion Izan Guevara went up. His teammate Sergio Garcia went up into Moto2. You had Pedro Costa go up. Mm-hmm. In fact, Pedro Costa went up last season. So, in fact, sorry, I'm getting a bit confused there, confusing the timelines. But yeah, basically, I think there's just this huge weight on Deniz's shoulders. He hasn't got that win yet. He's gone to the IO team, which is the reference Moto3, at the very least, the reference KTM team.
Yep.
They've got a real pedigree in the class. There will be an expectation for him to perform.
And his brother recently scored his first
Jan won in World Supersport in Mandalika, so I think he really feels that everything's just kind of aligning to really, I think, heighten the expectation and the pressure on him. And I think it's all self-inflicted pressure. I think this is all things that he is feeling himself. I don't think anyone's banging on at him to say, you've got to win, you've got to win. I think he knows that. I just think that the longer the time passes, that this first elusive win doesn't happen, the harder it's going to be, funnily enough, for him to get.
Yeah.
You're riding tight, you're going to make unforced errors like, he did today. Bowler actually said he would look like a man possessed. So that's not a good look in a wet race. You don't want to be constantly missing apexes. And
no, it's going to go wrong.
It looks like you're overriding. So... and we know Deniz has naturally got a tendency to be quite frantic as well. It's that last bit of... I feel when he's just lacking that last bit of racecraft. The talent's there. I've got no doubt about the talent. Just that last bit of racecraft, when to go hard, when to pull back a bit and go, okay, I'll live to fight another day on this one.
And he didn't do that today. And he was... we know how important it is to break the toe in Moto3, and he was kind of, I think he had sort of like 6 or 8 tenths at one point. So he was just obviously trying to just push that little bit harder, get another 5 or so bike lengths up the road, and just sort of drop the pack. And
it makes sense in that when you phrase it like that. But obviously you we talked in round 1, take 1, how you've got to sort of, as a real pro racer, you've got to be able to sort of come up to the line,
it's a balance,
and balance it and go, right, I've kind of gone over the line now, let me pull it back a bit. By all accounts, what you're saying is that Deniz didn't really seem to, he had a few hairy moments, but continued to ride
he was
as if like he was a scolded cat.
He was absolutely on one today, and he was like I say, missing apexes, and just he looked quick, and he looked like if he kept it on the island, that there was no doubt that it was going to be him who scored the win. I didn't see that there was anyone that was going to be able to keep up with him, but he just wasn't able to maintain that kind of. He was trying to basically pump in quali lap after quali lap after quali lap, and it's
just not going to happen. No.
It's going to go wrong eventually. So,
well, he's got a lot of rounds to obviously make amends. He started from pit lane in the last race and worked his way up to 10th and was less than 1.5 seconds off the win. Mm-hmm. Literally just a pack of 10, and he'd got a few more laps. He would have got right in between them. So. I think he's there. The package is there. It's just his self expectation, I think, is the issue here. I think once he gets that, like you said, that monkey off his back, and I've got no doubt this season, at some point, with 21 races in a calendar season, we're going to see that. It's going to come. It's going to come with the RS squad. Now, we both missed Moto3. Moto2, sorry. I should mention at this point, and this is my tight arse gene kicking in. I'm not renewing my BT subscription this year, so I'm unable to watch back races. I'm going to need to try and watch them live. As a family man, it's quite difficult. And also the pit pass, the MotoGP season pass, it's like €200. I'm like, I ain't paying €200 for a. So I'm just going to, maybe find, different ways of watching, maybe streams or highlights programs, but I've got to find out what they're on. So you're going to have to forgive us. We both unfortunately missed Moto2 today. I believe Tony Arbolino won, Alonso Lopez second, and good to see Jake Dixon flying the flag for the UK in third. So that's about all I can really say on that one. I like Tony Arbolino. I feel like he's making slow moves in that class. He's had some good rides, so good to see him win. I think we should go straight to the main event, Moto3, which we both watched, I'm happy to say. So I got here in time.
MotoGP, you mean?
Did I say Moto3?
You did.
Sorry, apologies. It's late. Take one has taken it out of me. MotoGP, the main event. And a new winner in Marco Bezzecchi.
Yeah, so congratulations to him on his first win. That's nice to see always. And it looked like the performance of a seasoned champion.
It did.
He just got to the front. And he was just metronomic.
Led from the front, not one single moment that I can remember that he looked like he was going to have a front ender or a rear wheel slide or a moment. I don't remember seeing anything. It was just wheels in line, just looked like he'd been doing it for years and years. It was just bizarre to watch in a good way.
Yeah.
Really, really just said, I'm off. I'm going to lead from the front. He was confident. Some people, they crumble under pressure. They don't like. They prefer to be the chaser rather than
somewhere just chasing the pack or
exactly,
second and then spring their move. But
he was like a seasoned campaigner. He just got out to the front, just little by little. Didn't go crazy. Just little by little, built the gap, and in the end, he had 5 or 6 seconds in hand.
It was more than that. I think he crossed. I'm not sure. I'm sure he eased off in the last couple laps, but I think at one point he was sort of 7 point something up the road.
Possible. Yeah.
So he romped off into the distance, and that was fantastic performance by him.
Ride of the day.
Yeah, and it was Bagnaia that we were crediting that with until he.
I was actually saying to Khan, watch it. I said, this is a champion's ride from Bagnaia. He was keeping it cool on in third, and then he obviously upped the pace a bit. How much he upped the pace, or how much Alex Marquez, great ride by the way for second, how much he was sort of losing pace, I'm not really sure, but obviously Bagnaia got past him, and by all accounts was comfortable. Was pulled away. It wasn't like Marquez was giving him grief and forced him into an error.
Right up until he wasn't.
Yeah, Pecco just did what, unfortunately, it seems Pecco is still able to do, which is to make unforced errors at very there's no opportune time, obviously, to crash, but seemingly with little to no pressure. It's just a mental thing, just able to have a mistake in him that sees him eating dirt, and that's not how championships are won. You really need to be consistent. I mean, I know last year was a real outlier. Quartararo, leading the first half of the season, and then Pecco overturned like a 90-point gap, 94, 95, 96 points it was. But this early on, you can't be throwing away points like that because, I said it was a champions ride, because if you can't get first, you get second. If you can't get second, you get third. That's what champs do. When they're not able to win, they're always there or thereabouts. They're not languishing down at the bottom, with some sort of problem. And it was just really disappointing because I like Pecco a lot. I think he interviews well. He comes across nice. And I like how he's sort of gone to Ducati and slowly built his career up, and now he's the reigning champ. I got to shout out Fabio Quartararo, though, because he got punted off the track. Who was it? I can't remember now. Was it one of the Ducatis? Was it Zarco? Can't remember exactly, but he got punted off track and went down. I think they said he was dead last.
I think he was down to dead last.
And he came through. It was like quietly went about his business. If it wasn't for Bezzecchi, I'd have said ride of the day was Quartararo, just for getting back through the field. And he's not known for being a wet weather specialist.
And also, I think Miller did a quite good job of working his way back up from, because he was. He wasn't dead last, but he was.
They said it was down right down at 16th, 17th. He started. We can check it, but yeah.
And I think he finished somewhere up in 6th 6th in the end, was it? He finished?
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, good performance from Miller today as well. The wet, as it always does, just threw the cat amongst the pigeons today,
Yes,
and unexpected
always.
results, and it's always the way that.
I was gutted that it wasn't a dry race, I have to admit. I like how Aprilia have gone about their business and sort of slowly but surely got to the front. And with Vinales especially looking really racy this year, and as somebody who's so mentally fragile, he's so easily put out of joint. They compare him sometimes to Jorge Lorenzo. If his mental game's not there, he's nowhere. And I like how he's sort of got a new home in Aprilia. And Alex Espargaro won his only race in the class last year on the Aprilia. And by all accounts, Aprilia in the dry, 1 and 2s in the practices. And you're thinking, this is on, this could be a Vinales victory. It'd be good to see that Maverick get a win. It's been a long time now. But the rain spoilt it. In that sense, I'm a bit annoyed because I wanted to see Vinales and Espargaro on the Aprilias battling it out, really going for each other. Never happened.
Yeah, it didn't. I mean, it's still an interesting race.
It was enjoyable.
The rain, like I say, the rain always just makes things so unpredictable, and it's in a lot of ways I actually prefer watching a wet weather race to a dry weather race because you just know it's going to be action. There's going to be thrills and spills and.
Well, I mean, yesterday we had exactly. It's the great equaliser. Now we should mention at this point again. I've got to be honest. It was my dad's birthday yesterday. Couldn't watch the sprint, and again I've not been able to watch it back. But Brad Binder, shout out to Brad Binder, started 15th and won the sprint. In again iffy conditions. And I love that the way that this sprint has sort of. I love that it's worth points. I don't like that some people seem to want to diminish the sprint. I get it's half points because it's a half race distance. And I agree with that. It's a bit different. Obviously in World Superbike, the sprint race also counts towards your grid position in the second race. Obviously MotoGP doesn't have a second race. We've just got a sprint and the main race. But they've done it so that the sprint is sort of self-contained. It doesn't... Your qualifying is still your qualifying. You don't win the sprint and then start on pole because you won the sprint, which is the case in World Superbike.
And I think I prefer the MotoGP format because we've seen it time and again where someone will in the sprint race may get wiped out and then through no fault of their own, their starting position for the following, for the main race is then compromised, and it's. I'm not sure that I entirely agree with the results of one race influencing another. So there's pluses and minuses to it, I guess, because you've kind of, it adds an element of having to maybe be a bit more tactical in live to fight another day in certain situations where maybe although I don't even know if I necessarily like that because we've always spoken about the one of the things that I really dislike about the way that that Formula One, for example, has gone. It's just basically become who can conserve their tyres the best competition as opposed to who's just the out and out fastest. So.
No, the sprint has thrown up some really nice, I think, added jeopardy because you're going to have to weigh up. Okay, I've got to go real hell for leather here, but I can't go so hell for leather that I'm going to jeopardise, my. If for a championship, these points are going to be important. They've even argued, this is one of the cons they're arguing. What if you turn out to be a bit of a sprint race specialist, and you amass points over in such a way that you win a lot more in, say, the sprint. End up being a champion because you've not won as many in the main event, but you became a sprint race specialist. I'm like, well, that's fair game, really, because for me, I don't think that will ever be the case because I think the cream will rise to the top. I think you'll always get the fastest guys are going to be the fastest.
But we've seen examples in the past of whether it's on 2 wheels or 4 wheels. some people just aren't capable of putting in a fast qualifying time.
Yeah.
And they're just not.
They're just race day. They're the Sunday races.
But yeah, they're Sunday races, and then they're just consistent, and they may not be the out and out fastest, but they're not having moments. They're not getting tangled up with other people, and struggling to think of a particular example of a driver or rider like that. But we've seen it in the past, where I think Coulthard was probably a good example of that. Actually, he was hideous on qualifying, from what I remember. He wasn't a good qualifier. But on race day he wasn't so bad. So yeah, it will definitely spice things up a little bit.
It's going to spice it up, and I like it. I'm against a sprint race at every round when you have a 21 round season. I'm thinking that more from an emotional dad point of view, because I'm thinking a lot of these teams and their staff will have families, and all that flying around for 21 rounds, and then having the added pressure that comes with having to prepare for a sprint race. As a rider, you could argue there's a safety element to it, because obviously you have to push like hell. You don't want to be bashed up, because you're too, how can I put it? You're too cautious, overly cautious in the sprint, and because it's one of those. It's like kill or be killed, basically, without putting too fine a point in it. And we'll talk about that in another pod. The safety element. I don't want to go too much into it now, because, like I said, we've already done a take one that turned out to be a non-starter. So this was more kind of on the spur of the moment. It was Khan's idea. I'm glad we've done it. We won't do this going forward constantly, because obviously we don't live very close to each other now, unfortunately. But I had to come up here. I wanted to learn this software. Khan's had a bit of experience with it in the past. So we've done it like this for this session. We're going to keep it a short and sweet one today. And I'm hoping next week we'll be able to record and maybe just go back to the standard remote format, and take a deeper dive into some of the kind of a lot of the social media fallout over the sprint race especially, and the different viewpoints that are being bandied about.
Yeah, definitely. So we'll like Jen was saying, we'll try and get another episode in later on in the week, and we'll sort of approach it with a slightly different slant there. So I think what we're going to try and do, or we were going to try and do, is we'll try and get something out on a Sunday, so that we can talk about the race while it's sort of hot and fresh out of the oven.
Yes.
And then like the midweek podcast can then be kind of more like a rider analysis, or sort of hot gossip from the paddock and those sorts of topics. So we're going to try and separate those two kind of portions of it out a little bit, and then it just means that we can get stuff out to you guys more often. So
yeah, the moment is just too irregular, and it's not through lack of trying per se. It's just circumstance, and sometimes just I think just underestimating the amount of time and effort that needs to go into something like this. Like just the setup for this with 2 cameras and Khan's manually sort of switching between them. It's really involved, guys. If you've never done it before, trust me. Especially if you're not versed in this, like I'm not. Khan's more of a hobbyist and knows what he's doing, but I'm picking all this up as I go along. So, we are trying. We will get there at some point.
So we won't bore the public with,
no.
with all of that stuff, but yeah. So I guess all that remains to be said is,
thanks for watching. Yeah.
And this has been the Fast Turks podcast.
And we'll catch you on the next one, guys. Thanks a lot.